3 rige lande i den islamiske verden brød. Ej langsomt, ej stilfærdigt, alt på én gang. Katars gasimperium splintret, Saudi-Arabiens sidste flugtrute ramt. Dubais tryghedsillusion væk på en weekend. Et mistede 17% af eksportkraften de næste 5 år. Et så sin eneste rørledning til verden sprænges. Et så 120 milliarder dollars forsvinde fra markedet på 1 måned. Disse var ej blot rige naboer. De var motor, bank, livline, der holdt hele den muslimske verden ovenvande. Og nu står den motor i flammer. I 2 årtier så verden på Katar, de forenede arabiske emirater og Saudi-Arabien og så noget tæt på uovervindeligt. Skylines, der rejste sig fra sand. Suveræne fonde større end de fleste nationale økonomier. Flyselskaber, der forbandt kontinenter. En diplomatisk neutralitet, så poleret, at resten af planeten behandlede disse lande som det ene hjørne af Mellemøsten, hvor Mellemøstens regler ej gjaldt. Den illusion er forbi, for på blot få uger tog hver eneste af disse søjler et slag, det aldrig skulle have taget. Og hvad der venter resten af muslimske verden, den delte i afhang af disse 3 til at forblive rige, er grimmere end nogen tør sige højt. Lad os være ærlige om, hvad disse 3 lande reelt var. Katar sad ikke blot på naturgas. Det leverede omkring en 1/5 af al den LNG, verden behøvede. Brændstoffet, der holder europæiske hjem varme om vinteren, og asiatiske fabrikker kørende gennem sommeren. Hele lande havde bygget deres energisikkerhed på formodningen, at Qatari-tankskibe ville dukke op. Saudi-Arabien var ej blot olieproducent. Det var finansankeret i den arabiske verden. Den sidste långiver, den dybe lomme, landet andre regeringer ringede til, når de ej kunne betale regninger. Den offentlige investeringsfond forvaltede alene 39 milliarder dollars i aktiver ultimo 2024, mere end de flestes BNP. Og emiraterne, især Dubai, var ej blot en by. Det var udgangsdøren. Stedet, hvor hver arabisk millionær, afrikansk oligark, sydasiatisk professionel, hver europæisk pensionist flygtede fra kaoset i deres egen region. Skattefrie lønninger, verdensklasse lufthavne, politi, der faktisk mødte op. Et ejendomsmarked, der fordoblede dine penge, mens du sov. Samlet var disse 3 ej blot rige. De var den strukturelle støttebjælke, der holdt en enorm del af den muslimske verden oppe. 0,5 milliard folk i nabolande afhang af golfpenge, jobs, overførsler, investering, billig brændstof. Gennem stiltiende løfte, uanset hvor slemt derhjemme, var der altid en flyrejse til Dubai. Den antagelse kørte showet i 20 år, og ingen spørgte, for ingen behøvede det. Og så den 28. februar 2026 gik motoren i stå. Hvad der skete de næste 6 uger skadede ej blot 3 økonomier, det brast fundamentet, en hel civilisation havde bygget sig på. Start med Katar, for Katar er det klareste eksempel på, hvor hurtigt et land for vigtigt til at fejle kan blive en advarselshistorie. I årevis var Katars strategi simpel. Vær uerstattelig. Underskriv 20-årige LNG-kontrakter med de største økonomier på jorden. Kile sig så dybt ind i Europas og Asiens energisikkerhed, at ingen ven eller fjende havde råd til, at noget ramte dig. Det virkede til, det ikke gjorde. Den 2. marts 2026 ramte iranske droner Katars energianlæg i Ras Laffan Industrial City og Mes Industrial City, de 2 komplekser, der producerer stort set al Katars LNG. Produktion standset. Force majeure erklæret. Europæiske engrosgaspriser steg næsten 50% på en dag. Asiatiske LNG-benchmarks steg 39%. Og så blev det værre. 18. og 19. marts vendte Iran tilbage. Missilangreb satte ild til andre LNG-anlæg ved Ras Laffan, inkluderer Pearl gas til væskeanlægget. Skader, der først var betydelige, viste sig katastrofale. Qatar Energys direktør Saad Al-Kabi indrømmede til Reuters, at 2 af anlæggets 14 produktionslinjer var ødelagt, og reparationstid 3-5 år. Det tabte udbytte, ca. 12,8 millioner tons LNG per år. Omkring 17% af Katars samlede eksportkapacitet, og det estimerede indtægtstab var yderligere 20 milliarder årligt. 20 milliarder årligt i op til et halvt årti. Og her er, hvad der bør holde Europas energiministre vågne om natten. Katar måtte erklære force majeure på langvarige kontrakter, der forsyner Italien, Belgien, Sydkorea og Kina. De kontrakter, som Doha i årtier solgte som ubrydelige, var pludselig det ikke. Tænk over, hvad det gør ved et land, hvis identitet var bygget på at være leverandøren, som verden ej havde råd til at miste. Det mister ej blot penge. Det mister indflydelse. Det mister den politiske præmie, der følger med at være landet, som andre lande tigger om at holde åbent. Og når den præmie er væk, kommer den ej tilbage i det øjeblik brænde slukkes. Den kommer tilbage, når købere stopper med at indregne afbrydelsesrisiko. Og efter at have set missiler rive gennem Ras Laffan 2 gange på 3 uger, går ingen tilbage til førkrigsprisantagelse forløbigt. IMF havde allerede flagget Katars svækkede finanspolstring, før noget af dette skete. Nu går Doha i forhandlinger med forsikrere, entreprenører og købere fra en position, som ingen i Golfen nogensinde er blevet tvunget til som skadet leverandør. Verdens største LNG-eksportør, ydmyget af 2 droneangreb. Men Katar var ej engang det værste. For ville man se, hvor skrøbelig regionen var blevet, behøvede man kun kigge over grænsen til landet, der skulle være for stort, for forberedt og for veludrustet til nogensinde at blive overrasket. Saudi-Arabien brugte 40 år på at forberede sig på dette scenarie. Hver saudisk planlægger kendte samme ubehagelige sandhed. Hvis Hormuzstrædet nogensinde lukkede, ville kongerigets olieeksportøkonomi være gidsel for et vandstykke, det ej fuldt ud kontrolleret. De byggede en omvej. Øst-vest-rørledningen, internt kendt som Petroline, løber 200 km tværs over arabiske halvø fra Østprovinsers oliefelter til Rødehavs jernbu. Kapacitet ca. 7 millioner tønder om dagen. Meningen var at give Saudi-Arabien en vej til at fortsætte eksport, selvom Hormuz gik i sort. Ultimo februar 2026 gjorde Hormuz netop det. Efter US-israelske angreb på Iran den 28. februar, gengældte Iran ved at lukke strædet, stoppede shipping for ca. 20% af verdens søbårne olie. Inden for dage havde Golfens olieproducenter stoppet ca. 13 millioner tønder dagligt. Hele regionen gik i nødberedskab. Saudi-Arabien gjorde præcis, hvad manualen sagde, omdirigerede alt via petrolien. Ultimo marts kørte rørledningen med fuldt 7 millioner tønders kapaciteter, firdoblede kongerigets rådhavsforsendelser. Den 9. april 2026, timer efter våbenhvile annonceredes, ramte Iran rørledningen. En pumpestation gik ned. Gennemstrømning faldt med 700.000 tønder over natten, og det stoppede ej der. Angreb skadede også Manifa offshorefelter og Qurai's-anlæg, skærende yderligere 600.000 tønder daglig produktionskapacitet. Ras Tanura-raffinaderiet, Saudi-Arabiens største med 560.000 tønder dagligt, var allerede ramt tidligt i krigen og lukket i 16 dage. Raffinaderier i Jubail, Yanbu og Riyadh blev alle skadet. En saudisk arbejder blev dræbt, 7 flere blev såret. Lad det synke ind. Rørledningen, der skulle redde Saudi-Arabien fra Hormuz-lukning, blev angrebet, mens våbenhvile blev underskrevet teoretisk, og backup fik hårdere slag end hoveddøren. Riyadh handlede hurtigt. Inden dage annoncerede Energimin, at øst-vest-rørledningen var genoprettet til fuld kapacitet. Manifa kom delvist online igen, men budskabet var allerede sendt højt og umiskendeligt. Landet med Golfens største suveræne formuefond, landet der pralede af at have plan B for alt, fik blot sin plan B sprængt i luften. Og nu gør Saudi-Arabien noget, det ej har gjort i årevis. Det gør reelle målbare nedskæringer. Vision 2030 megaprojekter, gigabyer, futuristiske udviklinger, billion-satsninger på turisme og underholdning er redan blevet beskåret og omplaceret, da olieindtægter faldt. The IMF noted central government debt rose to around 26% of GDP by end 2024, with deficits projected to persist over the medium term. Now layer war damage on that. Layer defense spending. Layer the costs of ensuring oil shipments through a strait that may not be safely traversable for months. Layer reconstruction on facilities that have just been hit twice. And then ask the obvious question. How many of those Vision 2030 dreams survive contact with this reality? The public investment fund's $13 billion looks enormous, but it can't substitute for an export route in real time. And while Riyadh patches the leak, the third pillar was quietly imploding in plain sight. Dubai never sold oil to the world. Dubai sold safety. That was the entire trick. The whole reason that 4 million people lived there, 90% of them expatriates, was the unspoken contract between the city and the rest of humanity. Come here, work tax-free, raise your kids, buy the apartment, live the life, and never ever have to worry about waking up to air raid sirens. That contract was torn up in a single weekend. Iranian missiles and drones struck UAE territory hundreds of times. By late March of 2026, Iran had reportedly launched 398 ballistic missiles, 1872 drones, and 15 cruise missiles at the Emirates, making it the second most targeted country in the war after Israel itself. Most got intercepted, but debris hit the Burj Al Arab. Debris hit Palm Draa, a luxury hotel on the Palm took damage. Residential towers in nearby Manama were hit. Dubai International Airport, one of the busiest in the world, handling around 95 million passengers a year, sustained damage and shut down completely on March 1st. In a single day, more than 3,400 flights were canceled across Dubai, Al Maktoum, Abu Dhabi, and Sharjah. Emirates and Etihad suspended operations. Wealthy expatriates reportedly paid up to $250,000 for private evacuation flights. Between February 28th and March 8th alone, 37,000 flights touching the Gulf were canceled. And then came the financial bleed. More than $120 billion was wiped off the market capitalization of the Dubai and Abu Dhabi stock exchanges in roughly a month. The Dubai index plunged 16%. Shares in Emaar Properties, the company behind the Burj Khalifa, fell more than 25%. Real estate sales collapsed by more than 50% versus February 2026 levels, with Goldman Sachs estimating transactions down 37% year-on-year. Some properties were being dumped at 10 to 15% discounts by sellers that were desperate to get out. Hotel bookings cratered 60% inside 48 hours. The World Travel and Tourism Council estimated the Gulf was losing $600 million in daily visitor spending. Citi cut Dubai's growth forecast from a 4% trend to just 1% for 2026. But the deepest damage isn't on any spreadsheet. It's the conversation happening in expat households across the city. The should we leave talk, the cooling pipeline of professionals who are thinking about moving to Dubai and have now quietly stopped because Dubai's growth model doesn't run on oil. It runs on the belief that the city is an island of safety, and once that belief cracks, no amount of cash can paste it back together. A regional support package was rolled out in early April. Financial relief for hospitality, price stability measures for retailers, government messaging insisting that the Emirates would bounce back. But the mood inside the towers less convinced, and here's the part that nobody is saying out loud yet. Hey, before that though, if you want more breakdowns like this, the kind that doesn't pull punches and doesn't pretend that the wealthy ones are untouchable, hit subscribe to Fall of Nations, because what we're about to show you is where this stops being a Gulf story. This is where it becomes everybody's problem. Specifically, the problem of about 1.5 billion Muslims across 3 continents who never saw the bill coming. The dirty secret of the modern Muslim world is how much of it was being held together quietly, invisibly, almost embarrassingly by Gulf money. Start with remittances. According to World Bank data, Saudi Arabia paid out roughly $46.6 billion in personal remittances in 2024. Qatar paid out around $11.5 billion. The Emirates paid out tens of billions more. That money flowed into Pakistan, Egypt, Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, the Philippines, Yemen, Sudan, Lebanon, Jordan, Morocco, into the household budgets of tens of millions of families whose entire monthly survival depended on a son or brother working a construction site in Dam or driving a taxi in Dubai. When the airport shut down, when projects froze, when companies started laying off foreign workers to conserve cash, that money stopped. Not gradually, not eventually, immediately. Now multiply that by the food shock. Roughly 70% of the food consumed by Gulf Corporation Council countries is imported through the Strait of Hormuz, the same strait that Iran has effectively kept closed since late February 2026. The result has been shortages and price spikes across the region. But the second-order effect is what nobody is talking about. The Gulf's normal role as a regional grain redistribution hub for poorer Muslim-majority neighbors is now broken. Egypt, Yemen, Sudan, and parts of the Sahel that depended on subsidized Gulf food flows are now staring at a hunger problem that they didn't have 8 weeks ago. And then there's water. Qatar gets 99% of its drinking water from desalination, Bahrain over 90%, the Emirates around 70%, Saudi Arabia 42%. Desalination plants need fuel, electricity, and uninterrupted operations to function. They're also some of the most strategically targetable infrastructure on the planet. When Iran openly threatened to attack desalination facilities, this stopped being an abstract risk and became a planning emergency. The cost of protecting these plants, military, financial, political, competes directly with every diversification dollar that the Gulf was supposed to be spending on its post-oil future. And then there's the capital. Gulf sovereign wealth funds have been quietly bankrolling everything from Egyptian infrastructure to Pakistani energy projects to Turkish bank rescues. When the Gulf has to plug its own holes, defense spending, reconstruction, emergency liquidity for its own banks, the outward flow of capital that was stabilizing half a continent just simply dries up. Pakistan was already in IMF talks, Egypt was already drowning in import bills, Lebanon was already in collapse, Jordan was already running on Gulf life support. None of these countries had a plan B for what happens when the Gulf itself stops being a plan A. This is what collapse of the Muslim world actually looks like in practice. It's not a single dramatic event, but rather a slow-motion liquidity crunch, spreading from Riyadh outward to every capital that's ever assumed the Gulf would always be there to backstop the system. And the people about to feel it hardest aren't the ones in the marble lobbies of Doha or the penthouses of Dubai. It's rather the workers in Karak whose families are about to stop receiving the monthly transfer that pays for school fees. The bakeries in Cairo where bread prices have already started climbing because the wheat supply chain runs through ports that suddenly cost twice as much to insure. It's the Indonesian and Bangladeshi domestic workers being sent home from Riyadh because the household that hired them is suddenly tightening every belt that it has. The ripple looks something like this. Energy prices spike. Brent crude touched $111 per barrel during the worst of the disruption. That's a windfall for exporters, but that's a wrecking ball for importers. Pakistan, Egypt, Bangladesh, Turkey, Morocco, Indonesia. Every Muslim-majority country that buys more energy than it produces gets hit with a brutal inflation shock. Currency started sliding. Central banks burn through reserves that are trying to defend exchange rates. Governments that were already politically fragile became more fragile. Meanwhile, the GCC's role as the region's piggy bank shrinks. Investment commitments get quietly delayed. Promised loans get renegotiated. Construction projects funded by Gulf capital gets paused or canceled. The Qatari and Emirati sovereign funds that were going to bail out half a dozen distressed neighbors suddenly have a list of priorities that are much closer to home. The Emirates actually did sign a $5.4 billion currency swap with Bahrain on April 8th of 2026, an emergency move to stabilize a smaller GCC partner. That kind of intra-Gulf rescue is exactly what these funds are built for, but it's also exactly the kind of move that crowds out everything that they were going to do for poorer countries further afield. Then there's the political dimension. Lebanon is on fire. Israeli strikes there killed hundreds in early April. Yemen, Syria, Sudan are all in some stage of active or frozen conflict. The number of states across the Muslim world that look one bad quarter away from a serious unrest event is genuinely frightening once you start counting them. When the rich neighbors are the ones absorbing the shock, the system holds. But when the rich neighbors become the shock, when Doha, Riyadh, and Dubai are themselves the stories that everyone's reading, the absorption mechanism stops working. Markets call this contagion. Historians call it part of the chapter where things start to look unreoverable. Diplomats just call it the part where the phone stops ringing because nobody has good news to deliver. This is where the Muslim world is sitting, not in collapse. Exactly, not yet, but in the precise structural position that has historically preceded collapse, where the support beams have cracked, the patches are temporary, and the next shock, well, it doesn't need to be very large to bring something down, and the next shock might already be on its way. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. The two-way ceasefire announced on April 8th of 2026, the one brokered by Pakistan, the one that was supposed to give the Gulf room to breathe and rebuild, was already breaking before the ink was dry. Israel never agreed it covered Lebanon. Israeli strikes on Beirut killed at least 182 people in a single day. Iran responded by closing the Strait of Hormuz again, barely 48 hours after agreeing to open it. Saudi Arabia's pipeline got attacked anyway. Kuwait reported new drone attacks. Asian markets barely had a day to celebrate before oil prices started climbing back above $97 a barrel on news that the truce wasn't holding. Then on April 12th of 2026, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance announced that talks between the United States and Iran in Islamabad had failed after 21 hours of negotiations. President Trump immediately declared a U.S. naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, with the U.S. Navy preparing to intercept ships entering or exiting Iranian ports starting April 13th. Iran's IRGC warned that any military vessel approaching the strait would face a severe response. Again, a severe response. Ceasefire signed, pipeline attacked, strait reclosed, talks failed, naval blockade declared. 5 steps, 5 days. The Gulf isn't in a recovery phase, it's in a holding pattern, waiting to find out whether the next round is worse than the last one. And every additional week that this drags on, the financial damage compounds, the expat exodus accelerates, the food and water systems get more strained, and the chain reaction across the broader Muslim world picks up speed. The pillars cracked, the patches are temporary. The next blow, it doesn't have to be big, it just has to land. So, here we are. 3 of the wealthiest countries on this planet looked at as proof that the modern Muslim world had finally outgrown its crisis. All sitting in the same room holding the same bag and hoping that the same fragile ceasefire will hold long enough to let them rebuild what's been broken. The engine's on fire, the bank is rationing cash. The lifeline that kept hundreds of millions of Muslims one paycheck above water is fraying in real time, and the story isn't really about whether Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the Emirates survive. They will. They have the reserves, they've got the institutions, they have the buffers that most countries can only dream of. The story is about everyone downstream of them, the countries that built their entire post-Cold War survival strategy on the assumption that Gulf wealth would always be there to catch them. That assumption is dead. So, what do you think? Are the wealthiest countries in the Muslim world just the first dominoes? Or is there still time to stabilize this before the rest of the region goes with them? Drop your call in the comments, and while you're there, subscribe to Fall of Nations for more frontline breakdowns on the stories that nobody else is willing to follow all the way to the bottom.